right, we're live. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We start off here with Rick Thompson, of course, Mr. Hash Bash, Adam Brook, Anton Harm, our guests, who sometimes we like to have our guests, if they're up for it, come on early, be part of the conversation, and then we kind of segue into more of a focus, on the interview, and we might even be joined by another colleague. And it's going to be a great discussion. We had Pam Lynch on a couple of weeks ago, and everybody loved that. And this is kind of a continuation of that discussion and some of the research and other people involved that she was referring to.
And you are Jamie Lowell. You never introduced yourself.
Nope.
And Becca Newman is our special guest you were referencing, but didn't name. Becca, thank you. Welcome to the show.
And we have people just listening and not watching, so I always forget to point that kind of stuff out. Rick takes care of that. That's his job. And join a rare visit from Shelly Smith. But I think you'll find this conversation interesting today too, Shelly. Last night on Medical Mondays, it was a kind of a bizarre conversation. There was Brad Forrester and Eric Gunnels.
That was bizarre.
And of course, Bergen Roach. I think they constituted most of the discussion. I mean, Adam had some good stuff to say here and there. But to me, and I said at the end of the show, because I didn't really participate in a lot of this discussion, is that that let me know that experience last night, the wide range of issues and different views and angles and all the things that cannabis possibly brings to a discussion, and a lot of idealist kind of thinking and a lot of passion and great intent, and it might be confusing for some people to watch, but people should watch it to
what was
be
weird
confused.
What was weird about the show?
To be confused. Well, I think that there were people. It kind of reminded me at times, and I don't want to. Again, I think people should watch it their own way and have their own perspective and that kind of stuff. But I got a waiting for Godot kind of vibe, where somebody would say something with a particular intent. Somebody might hear it as a slightly different subject matter with a different perspective on the same issue, maybe, and then respond to that, and then. It was interesting. I mean, that's from my perspective, and I'd like to hear all the people say we should have done this and we should have done that, and and how much that really means, and even though we try to explain how those processes worked and what the experience was getting the laws in place, people still seem to think that we could just have done it differently, like just decided to wait or just decided to done something. It wasn't like that at all. And,
like a 10% tax was something we chose, right? Yeah, no, we chose no tax, and 10% is what they made.
And local option and stuff. Go ahead. Yeah.
It was very abrogate-ish.
Ugh.
It was kind of, yeah. Like I see ideal.
Like a great idea. There were a ton of great ideas, but it doesn't work that way. Kind of like the founding of our nation. I mean, what a great concept, right? This Bill of Rights and this Constitution, and don't have it apply to anybody that we don't want it to apply to, even though in the first sentence it says it applies to everybody. I mean, that same concept. Here's some people with some grandiose ideas and the inability to make anything happen, let alone the grandiose ideas. So
the abrogate reference is a reference to an alternate group that run a petition drive to legalize cannabis. It was rather unrealistic, and it was poorly staffed and achieved very little results. At the same time, we at MI Legalize, received hundreds of thousands of signatures. So abrogate was a well-intended effort that was just never got off the ground because it was not a realistic pathway.
And
we all said we preferred that. We prefer that the way to go. We just can't achieve it right now.
Correct. But I was going to say many of the MI legalized people actually preferred the abrogate plan. They just knew that it was unrealistic. Yeah, and then there were people like myself who knew that, well, I don't have to like what's being put forward. It just moves the ball in the right direction. It's not offensive to me.
Sometimes things like that are like things like that are like the baby step thing, where you have to like do it in steps, and especially with stigma permeating this whole culture at the levels that you're trying to change, that's it's gonna happen like that.
Yeah, it's the reality of the process. We all kind of had our views of this going in, and then after some experience and feedback and a little bit more of an understanding of things, we went with the best that we could get.
The cannabis industry certainly has more than its share of Monday morning quarterbacks, and especially anytime politics are involved, it's easy to say this is what I wanted, so you shouldn't have done this. But the actual work in the trenches is much more difficult when you're out there collecting signatures and you have to explain a petition to people that stop by to sign it, and when you have to make sure that you have a proposal that's likely to get selected by the voters. Our MI legalized proposal, the MRTMA, was 56% approval. For cannabis proposals, that's very good in the nation. So we think we did a good job.
The other thing to realize is, I mentioned it last night and I mentioned it before, is that where we are today, we're only here today at this spot because of grassroots efforts. This was a grassroots movement. And unfortunately, the marijuana movement and the marijuana culture became a cannabis industry. And the cannabis industry is run by the same people who make the rules. And these are people who don't use cannabis, don't understand cannabis, and wouldn't know the difference between cannabis and marijuana if it was spelled out to them. So for these people to now have an industry that, should be judged, they haven't been around long enough to judge the industry. We can only judge it on its merits. So far, it's failed twice, and caregivers have had to save it. So you've heard me say this before. I don't think caregivers should have been allowed to save it. I think it should have collapsed, and we should have started over. But I'm certainly happy we are where we're at today, and caregivers are better for it.
There's certainly a concern that in California that this whole collapse of a market is potentially looking as if it might be a reality. They have a heavy taxation issue. There's a large hole in their law which allows people to legally grow a whole bunch of plants and then just disappear with them and turn them right into the unregulated marketplace. And quite a few news articles lately have talked about the regulated marketplace coming out in the same way that we did before the regulated marketplace existed, with protest signs and microphones on steps of Capitol buildings saying we need relief, we need something different. Even a regulated system isn't perfect when it's created.
When Adam says allow it to collapse, he's referring to the emergency rules. I think it was Emergency Rule 19, and it allowed the caregivers to bring cannabis into the marketplace to have inventory that wasn't able to be supplied by the licensed cultivators and processors.
Yep.
And instead of doing that, he's suggesting we should have just demonstrated that it wasn't a very strong system, that had a hard time coming out of the gates and becoming established, and maybe forced people to look at it differently and to start over and to maybe include the caregivers proper from the beginning. And I like the idea of caregivers being able to be involved again in some reasonable manner. And
without having to go through a lot of hoops or have additional licensure.
Yeah, not this crap that's in 5301. Yeah, exactly. Some reasonable manner, not just saying that you could do it somehow. Right. Paul Tylenda's joined us, attorney Paul Tylenda, and anxious to get into the 51-2 discussion a little bit. And
I was going to follow up on the what Rick was picking up
on.
Go
ahead.
Is meaningful participation by the caregivers. Meaningful participation by the caregiver system is what the caregivers want, and ultimately provides certainly a big solution to the MRA, because now the MRA can say, if one of our stated goals is to defeat the illegal market, caregivers can certainly help with that. But it also comes at, now we're in the game of politics, right? We are playing politics, and to think that those who are opposed to the caregivers would support a system by which the caregivers could participate, to me says that there is a quid pro quo for something, that the big companies are satisfied with giving up that little bit because they mean they gain a larger piece of the ground somewhere else. And the question is, what's that larger piece of ground that they gain by conceding that to the caregivers? Because the first side is, you concede some of the caregivers, you are ultimately going against your own position of allowing someone to come in to compete at the recreational level, at the commercial level, who hasn't paid the dues, monetarily and otherwise to participate in the recreational and legal system. Why would they backtrack on that sort of ideology, fundamental ideology, to allow the caregivers to participate at some degree? Now, is that because they know that the caregiver participation will be limited in number and in amount in terms of a quantity that can introduce into the system? Or what's the backside? What are they getting for what they're giving up? And maybe they're not really giving up anything because they're actually just controlling the caregiver position thereafter. So let's dig deep. Like, where's the money?
Paul, there was a comment up there just a moment ago about townships opting out. And for those people that are not familiar with it, there was a program here in Michigan where we were under the impression that townships and cities had to either opt in or opt out to medical marijuana, or else magically that after a certain date, stores could just pop up like mushrooms in the middle of the street. And then, the city of Detroit chose not to either opt in or opt out by that particular date. Some stores tried to pop up like mushrooms, and they got sued. And guess what, Paul? Tell everybody what happened.
There still isn't recreational marijuana ultimately as a result. And that part, if I can I don't know if this is much of a tangent to the side, but the strategy of controlling the timing of opting in, which Detroit's doing, that other municipalities haven't quite done, with such a carrot on a long stick, is Detroit's always said, we'll have it, we'll give the voters what they want. I'm of the mind that Detroit might be manipulating, I don't want to say manipulate, it's a terrible word, but Detroit might be crafting their own reality into say that they will drag their feet when it comes to opting in to create I don't want to call it a trap, but let's say that's a trap, so that you have those who are there, who are vested, who are property owners, who are not going anywhere because they have all of their dollar and all their retirement money vested into a Detroit business that's been there likely since the caregiver days. And Detroit knows that they have those business owners by the back of the neck, because you have so much money in here, you're so vested, you're so connected, you're not going anywhere because you recognize the value of your ticket. But in terms of the other large industry, large players, big money, Detroit's actions are icing those out, because Detroit, by not opting in now, is making them they're making them their market irrelevant to a large degree for the outer market, to where under caregiver days, Detroit was drawing from Flint and Port Huron because of a safe and easy access. When the suburbs around Detroit opt in, and let's call it the beltway around Detroit opts in, that, as they say, crossing 8 Mile isn't a reality for cannabis markets anymore, right? When Hazel Park and Ferndale and Madison Heights and everything else became recreational, that area around 8 Mile started to dry up because their southbound traffic, the driving traffic, wasn't going there anymore because of proximity. Now, what Detroit could be doing is Detroit could be dragging their feet deliberately to create a city-based reward for those who stuck it out, and creating an intricate market for the neighborhood stores, because the neighborhood stores will be the walkable stores and the mom and pop shops that will serve primarily the neighborhoods rather than the whole city itself. Now, that could be good for some, but bad for the overall number of stores in Detroit that, in political terms, equal a monetary kickback to the city itself from the state. So never mind the fact that they've limited it to 75, which limits, they're only getting 75 retail, let's say, returns from the state money, and the other ones kind of go by the other numbers. But I think Detroit might be doing this in a way to reward their citizens by making it more of a neighborhood retail than a mall or an 8 Mile or a fringe retail, which in 5 years' time, if that's the case, Detroit might have great access for its residents without having a let's say a Walmart type of presence by the big box stores.
You know, I use Occam's razor on this. You cut everything down to the simplest thing. And what's the simplest thing? The City of Detroit Council absolutely hates the people that currently own all the medical dispensaries in the City of Detroit, which I think everybody on this call knows that's true. And every day that you deny them a recreational license, you deny them a revenue. You deny them money. So until you can craft a way where you can give that revenue to people who are not the folks that are currently owning all the medical marijuana dispensaries in the City of Detroit, they'll continue to drag their feet until they come up with that magic solution.
Or you accept their existence. I mean, and then work to help the other people.
You should
as well.
I'm gonna take it one step farther and tell you that the reason we don't have recreational marijuana in Detroit is because the players who put the system into effect in the city of Detroit didn't all have their ducks in a row, and they weren't ready to open their shops that their family owns and that their family members and their wives and their cousins, and they weren't ready. So there was no reason when they wrote the legislation for the city of Detroit to put the poison pill in there that if anything in this is ruled unconstitutional, the whole thing is unconstitutional. You flunk one test.
Severance. Right?
Right, you flunk one test and you're going to fail the grade, the year. I mean,
but they had to put that in there though, just in case the court said you can't have your little carve out for your city residents. Paul's nodding; he knows because that was the thing that was the most likely to be killed by the courts. Now, if you wanted to make sure that if you didn't have that in there, no part of that law went in place.
But they put that in there for a reason. I mean, you have to understand that this is a city that's already dealt with the residency issue. Okay,
police residency.
If you're old enough to understand residency in the city of Detroit, you can tell the day things died was the day that they said you no longer have to live in the city of Detroit if you work for the city of Detroit. And that changed the city of Detroit overnight.
So true.
You know, we're going to see if we can get Councilman Tate, maybe some of the people that have been working on it. I went to a couple of events in Detroit put on by Najanava and Clean Smoke Initiative. And Councilman Tate was there. And at both times, he said in the first quarter of this year, there'll be some movement on the new ordinance. So it'll be interesting to hear what's going on with that and see how or if these things were addressed.
Here's what they're going to do, Jamie, and I'll bet money on it. You will have recreational grows in the city of Detroit within the first quarter of the year. You will not have recreational dispensaries yet.
Well, they got rec grows going in because you've got Al Harrington with Viola. You've got that whole big campus complex that's being put in by, boy, I wish I could remember that other sport hero's name. It escapes me, but there are
Calvin
several.
Johnson?
No,
Chris
it's
Webber?
not.
Ben Wallace?
Chris Webber. I think it's
Chris Webber thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's supposed to be a big one.
It's like a $50 million investment.
And these are years away, these things.
Yep. Well, by the same token, today the press release said the city of Warren has opened up a 15,000 square foot growing facility for Red, White, and Bloom, which has the national account for all of the High Times cannabis branded retail stores. Right. So that's just literally. I lived in Warren for a great number of years. That's just literally 1 or 2 miles north of the infamous 8-mile northern border of Detroit. So your neighbors are moving at a faster rate than the city is, and the city will eventually suffer for it, I think.
Well, the city residents won't suffer, and that's who the councilman is beholden to. The people who suffer are the people north of 8 Mile, who no longer have to drive into the city of Detroit to get their marijuana. Now, I'm not sure how they suffer because the city of Detroit doesn't really care about those people. Now, those businesses might, and those dispensaries might, because that's a market. But the city doesn't care if people come into the city to do business, especially if they're coming to do business on something the city is slow-rolled and treated like a redheaded stepchild. No offense to the redheads out there, but
we're the new strip clubs. It's the new strip club.
Well,
fight.
It's something they have to tolerate, but they hate.
Correct. And I've pointed this out before that, the city of Detroit killed the greatest anti-blight program they ever had. 280 plus storefronts were overnight opened up. Every
marijuana dispensaries.
They fixed up with a lot of money in these places.
Every strip club has a vacant building on either side of it, and they turn those into dispensaries. They turn the worst places in the world into dispensaries. They had this great thing going, and then they decided that they were going to shut them all down. And worse than that, at the same time, they came to the people and said, $250 million. So we're going to do this bond issue, and we need you to vote for this $250 million. And I said, wait a minute, why don't you license those 280 dispensaries and tell them, you know what, we got this great deal. 280 of you mothers, you can buy $1 million license. It's all we're giving out.
That's something that I was going to bring up, and I do kind of want to move on a little bit, but I was going to say 300, same idea, that these places proliferated around Detroit, and the city stepped back and did nothing to reasonably address this. And so then we were deep in, years in, established places, and then oh yeah, you can't do that now, and so that's a huge conflict that was created just from allowing that stuff to happen without even addressing it in any reasonable way.
And we're almost at 500 dispensaries statewide now in the regulated marketplace, and we were already at 500 dispensaries statewide in about 2016, including about 300 in the city of Detroit.
And they were all rocking. There was
rocking.
There wasn't this issue of
nobody
trying to hurt the guy next to you or the other, or trying to hurt the caregiver system over it or anything like that.
You know what, actually, Jamie, the lingering effect of the caregiver model on state ordinances, municipal ordinances throughout the state, was the cities recognized that as a way to be a blight busting device and as a way to be a redevelopment device. And a lot of the ordinances were saying, okay, our green zone is now this old dump area that we're going to rely on you to rebuild. Or my favorite one is, I believe it was Weberville. Weberville, their ordinance was like, you can build anything you want west of Oak Street. And there was nothing west of Oak Street. So when you wanted to go there, you were building them a city, you were building infrastructure, you were building plumbing, you were bringing everything over, and you were doing everything that a neighborhood developer would do, but you're building them an industrial park, which, is different than building 2,000 square foot residential homes. So it was a smart recognition by those municipalities as to what the possibility or the potential was, or the desire was from these businesses.
I think Pinconning
something
got it.
That was nothing.
I think Pinconning got it set off, and I remember, and I want to spend that much more time on this, but I remember, I think Rick was at this meeting with me too. The economic development head was this retired medical doctor who had decided that he really believes in medical cannabis, reasonably, and when he saw the marriage of these two things, he was really touched by it. He was crying during the meeting as he was describing how these things coming together. It was like the ideal, from his perspective, just the ideal thing to help out the city and to help out people, or the township, and help out people.
Just one more comment before we go right to Jamie's subject. Sure. What this really did, and what you described, Paul, is create a lot of value for otherwise fallow farmland, right? So a lot of places that had no chance of being developed were actively developed by people because that's where they allowed them to do it. Jamie, I'm sorry, I just had to get that in, but let's go ahead.
No, this is a great subject matter. We'll have to get back into it. This is
really
one of these ones that we just turned into
history.
This,
little history for people today.
Yep.
And I do think it's interesting. I think this is really interesting because, as a commenter on Facebook noted, I've noticed the same thing. It's just all of these big corporate interests, and why, when we had, all of these local people that are part of our communities that were, part of this, and now all of a sudden it's cost prohibitive and it's really difficult for them. Why are we excluding our community and bringing in these big corporate interests that's against our own best interest as Michiganders, I think. So this is a really interesting conversation, guys. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Small businesses are the engine of employment in the state of Michigan. That every governor comes in and says the same thing too. We got to promote small businesses. So why this industry would be any different than any other small business based industry, I don't know.
So we have room to talk about this again and often, and we will. And I appreciate all the input on this, and I'm glad it turned into an interesting conversation. But I did want to get to some focus on remembering Allen Peisner, who's attorney in this community and passed away recently of lung cancer. And there was a really excellent tribute to him on Planet Green Trees Thursday night that could be watched on YouTube or Facebook now, and a lot of his colleagues came on, and people have known him throughout the years and offered up their perspective. I had a couple of rough goes with him from time to time, but last few years we were pretty tight, and he represented me a couple times when I needed some legal assistance, and he was always available there for me when I wanted to talk deeper legal analysis on some of these things, and was ready and willing all the time. And I really appreciated him, and I miss him. And not everybody had a great experience, but a loss to the community, as far as I'm concerned. And just a
big asset. Very, very big asset. Not just to, and this is where, let's just say to the gravity of the type of guy that Allen was, is not only was Allen a big brain when it came to the cannabis community, but he was also a big cannabis brain when it came to the legal community. And Allen was probably as well recognized and respected in both. And that, it's hard to do. And the thing that, for me, I've had cases again with when Allen is there, and his, he is the wise sage that would seem to, come off the mountaintop to impart all the wisdom on this case. Well,
a lot of lawyers said that about him. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, making Kamorn and I look like little babies, and he shows up and he's just like, this is what's happening. And you're like, Jesus Christ, where have you been for the last 3 months, man? Come on. And that was always helpful. It was great. But for me, on a personal side, being a young attorney and coming out into cannabis when it was discouraged, and, I had other attorneys tell me to not get anywhere near it. It was comforting to see a guy who was of Allen's age and of experience to be committed to it. And it made me feel good about the practice of law, other attorneys, but it made me also feel really good about the endeavors of cannabis, because even though, sure, you had Matt Abel, and he's not that much older than I am, but when you had, a guy like Allen who, when I first put a suit on before I had all this gray, he was a senior fellow to me. And that was inspiring, because it wasn't that it was just a kid's game, if you will, right? There was a respected elder leader to that. And it was tremendous for me, and that in itself was inspiring, because it wasn't, it wasn't something that you had to hide with him. It wasn't something that he gave up along the way. He was loud and proud about it the whole way. And back when that wasn't easy, and that was, commendable as an individual, but for me doubly, because he was an attorney leading that, blazing that trail kind of by himself, and that's a rare quality.
Allen and I and Jamie did probably, I don't know, between 35 and 50, maybe more episodes of Planet Green Trees together. We did a lot of podcasting together, but where Allen was known best, I think, was behind the scenes. He was an AV guy. He was a tech whiz. We would do broadcasts at Jamie, what was the name of that place that we used to broadcast with PGT? It's a fun little place.
It's an Irish name.
Yeah.
O'Malley's.
O'Malley's, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So O'Mara's or something like that.
O'Mara's, that's it.
O'Mara's, yes. So, and he would always be there doing sound and stuff. And at PGT, he was a troubleshooter. Plus, I understand at the cannabis law section of the Michigan Bar Association, Allen was sort of that role there as well too. So, as someone who knew Allen as an attorney and as a friend, I doubly miss him. And Jamie's right; he had a personality that sometimes people would take off, but Allen was always good, and he was a man who was true to his faith as well too. So, Adam, I know you wanted to get in here too.
Yeah, I appreciate it. it's funny because I couldn't do Planet Green Trees the other day, and I did listen to it, and so far, the one thing I will say about Allen, nobody has a bad thing to say about him. Even if you disagreed with him, even if he rubbed you the wrong way here.
Yeah, but isn't it a little early at this point?
Huh?
I mean,
what'd you say?
I say give it time is what he's saying.
Yeah, it's a little early.
No. I mean, even when he was alive, nobody said bad shit about him. I mean, we all got our detractors, and some of us actually have real haters. I mean,
some of us do.
Yeah, fuck you, dude. So the point is,
there's one.
I mean, I'm jealous, man. This dude's got a cartoon made of him. Nobody's making cartoons of me. I've been in this game 30 years.
There were several cartoons made by that one, actually. I think 3, Jamie, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, anyways.
No such thing as bad publicity.
No.
Finally embrace it after 10 years of it. Yeah.
Ambiguous.
But Allen was this guy who, because of the type of guy he was and because of my lot in life, he came up to me right away and he's like, hey, I can do this and I got this. And here, look at this photo I took of you. And this was back when we were printing photographs. I mean, there weren't digital pictures like now. You show up somewhere, Allen's there, and the next day you get like a whole barrage of photos of yourself, and he was that guy. I used to hang out at his house, and copious. The word is copious, ladies and gentlemen. Copious amounts of marijuana. I mean, the walls were yellow, but that was the cigarette. And we used to shoot pool together and hang out, and we would talk about these legal things that, I'm not a lawyer, man. I'm just an opinionated idiot. But he would explain why things worked the way they work. And it was kind of like going to law school, it was kind of cool and it also only related to this subject that I'm interested, marijuana, and why it was illegal and what was happening to people. And one of the cool things about Allen is the stories he would tell you. And one day he found out that my wife's uncle was one of his law school teachers who now is a federal judge. And he says, I got to tell you, he says, Uncle Art, man, he's a unique character. I'm like, yeah, he's one of those guys that could rub you the wrong way if you didn't appreciate his humor. And I'm thinking, Allen, how well do you know this guy? Because you two would be hysterical together. He says, yeah, my first day of class, he says, I'm sitting in the back of the room and some guy comes in and sits down next to me and asks me what I know about this teacher and why class is not started on time. And, I said, well, I hear he's pretty good and I don't know why things haven't started on time. And then he says the next thing he knows, the guy stands up next to him and leads the class. He's the professor. Now, just so happens he's now my wife's uncle. It was my wife's uncle. So this guy's family to me. And Allen thought that was really cool. That, it's Judge Tarnow, by the way, Paul. And it's just interesting that he was his law school teacher. He had become friends of the judges over the years. Was at his installation, photographed it, all of that. So Allen and I had some real close family bonds. He lived near my mother-in-law, so it was not uncommon for me to ditch hanging out at my mother-in-law's and go over to his place and hang for the day. So, but a hell of a guy and very, very knowledgeable on anything he spoke on. If he was talking about it, he had educated himself about it. Whether it was his garden outside. A classic story with Allen is Allen had what I believed was an illegal catch basin for rainwater that he then used to water his outdoor garden. And I believe that I read that it was illegal to catch the water from your gutters and then use it to water your lawn and shit like that. And he's like, no, I can guarantee it's not. And I thought he was using barrels, 55-gallon barrels. No, Allen's got 250-gallon tanks, 2 stacked on top of each other in the backyard with this massive garden that when the crops come in, you can't take just a couple. He gives you like bushels of tomatoes. And so, very giving, very caring. And anything you want me to grow, I'll grow it. I got this huge garden. I can grow. And he spent a lot of time and took care of it. And I'm not sure when he actually educated himself on these new legal cases and stuff. But, he must have had a photographic memory or something, because he was always busy. When did he learn? When did he study? When did he educate? But fascinating guy, and we're all better for knowing him. And unfortunately, we lost him in a tragic way, if you ask me.
He did, just incidentally, he had cancer, and he did try oil several times over like a 3-year period, and I don't know the details of how it was done or anything like that, but for whatever reason that didn't. Maybe it helped things out in some ways, but it didn't do what we've seen done in other situations.
Yeah, he was not the guy that should have suffered at all. Some of us should suffer, okay? I'm not gonna lie. I know what's happening to me. I'm falling apart because I'm an asshole. But guys like Allen, he shouldn't have suffered a day in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. He should have woken up dead one morning. He shouldn't have suffered. He was that good of a guy. My people say that a guy like that is a mensch. And what we mean by that is he's a stand-up guy. And that's what Allen Peisner was. So.
Appreciate it, man. Does anybody else here know Allen or have anything to say about Allen before we move on?
Let's see.
Are you guys seeing? I was going to say, are you seeing the same caliber of people coming up now? You guys are kind of the OGs here, and you see there's the younger generation that's now getting involved with this community/industry portion of things. And I mean, folks like Allen, they're going to be, down the road. Are you guys seeing folks who are kind of standing out, who are kind of get those types of reputations, or see the standouts in the younger crowd?
Here's the thing, though. Any attorney that's coming around at this particular point is coming around in a legal market, so they're not really an attorney that had to put their ass on the line. Paul Tylenda, sitting right down there, defended me and Big Daddy's back in 10 and 11 when we were, and it wasn't a guarantee that you keep your law license if you defended someone who was committing a federal crime. It was difficult. So at this particular time, there are people who are doing good things, and I'd like to give them praise. But I don't think you can't replace a person who actually walked that line and like Paul said, helped other attorneys find their way towards the cannabis space and helping people that were disadvantaged by the civil and criminal situation.
Yeah, right. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just going to say, now one of the largest things going on in the legal world is I call it form compliance. So if I want to get into the game, I have to go to somebody like Paul, who then makes sure that we fill out all the forms properly, so that when we turn them into the state, they approve us. Now, I assume that in law school they teach form filling. I don't know what makes lawyers so good at this, but in every industry, when you start up, it's the lawyer who puts all the proper paperwork in order. Well, licensing is the biggest game we have right now in the industry. And it's the lawyers who don't even have to know the law. They just have to make sure you fill out the right forms. They don't have to know why or how it works.
They just hire smart people in their office to do it for them.
Well, that's part of the game of the law office. And once you understand what the LLC is all about, you'll understand that these are the best consultants you can ever have, because maybe not on this show, but I get Paul Tylenda on the phone, and anything I say to him is between him and I. And then he goes out in the world and he gets an accountant, and he gets a construction guy, and he vets everybody, and he makes sure that we've got all our ducks in a row before we take our paperwork and get approved, because it costs too much money to fuck it up. So
That's true.
to pay this guy $200, $300, $400 an hour to help us out, it's worth 40, 50, 60 grand.
Let me just read a couple of comments from the chat here. Jamie Cooper writes, Allen was a great guy. He will be missed. And Latrish Mason writes, first time I met Allen was at the Cannabis Council meeting. He really liked taking pictures. Super nice guy. There are other people that gave praise. If you happen to be on social media the day that we found out, or even the day after we found out that Allen had passed, you'll notice there were a lot of tributes from different people, attorneys, non-attorneys. It really was quite touching.
So Anton, to answer your question, I think that there are a group of young attorneys and growing who, even though they're coming into a new world where there's been a lot of work done, are adopting some of those same type of philosophical approaches and regard for rights and compassion for people and all the things that Allen and Paul and others who've been doing this have.
I think you might, I think somehow, like legendary attorneys in my mind are like superheroes. It just seems like they show up one day. You seldom get to watch them grow and blossom and sort of come around. Is that one day you just meet him, you're like, who the hell is this guy? Where has he been my whole life? So I think in terms of, let's say the academic and intellectual side, my hope is that there will be somebody who has, the Rolodex of case law and just sort of the organization of thought that was so beneficial to a subculture and a sub community. But Rick is right that the Wild West days are becoming, we're in a legal market right now, and the risk of, having to navigate when you leave work so you don't get pulled over, those days are gone. I think we'll start to see, maybe in the next handful of years, you'll see like the mushroom crowd and some of those attorneys starting to, pave the way and start to lead in the same way that we did through the Compassion Club scene and get that out. But I think even with, the attitudes, the attitude of when cannabis kind of broke down the door, it put consumption of substances into perspective. So I don't think that we're going to have too much of the arguments going forward that somehow mushrooms are going to lead you into cocaine or heroin, or that they're somehow associated. So, the landscape will change moving forward, but, thankfully, the risk of just, living your life and ending up in a box for it, at least in this state, is, all but gone.
Well, how about
losing your law license too?
Losing your law license. That's the thing that most people don't understand about the lawyers, is that forget about the guys like Allen Peisner, who smoked weed everywhere he went, smoked in his Cadillac everywhere he went.
Big ass Cadillac.
I can talk. I was there. I was a part of it. I saw it. The point is that there was a time when just being associated with us and working with us could have cost you your law license.
Denny Hayes was involved
exactly.
in the grow shop case,
right?
And the feds looked all the way up his skirt just because they were his clients. And that, I remember with the MMA, with some of the protective language, when I was seeking, advice from the state and from the ethics boards about like, hey, this is what the law says, does that apply to me too? They could never give you a straight answer. But,
I'd be hard pressed.
Hey, we're getting
to say anything now.
As I'm noticing here, we're getting out of control here with time, and interesting conversation. But
what a surprise! We get out of control with time on Jazz.
We have to pay attention to Becky and Becca, who have come on to get a little bit of a focus. And although I appreciate Becky you contributing to these conversations that we're having right now, because your input's welcome. And I'm glad you came on early to be a part of the show all the way through.
I learn a lot when I'm listening to these. So
cool. So I just wanted to I wanted to get into House Bill 5512 and use it as an attempt at an efficient segue into focusing more on the conversation that we're going to have with Becca and Becky, and we'll introduce them a little bit more. But these people work on the independent study of the harm reduction, the cannabis as an exit strategy from dependency on dangerous substances that we talked about with Pamela Lynch a couple weeks ago. And so I'm excited to continue that conversation. But I think 5512 is related, and I don't have Paul to weigh in on this, but let me just give my issue with it, or what I think is the concern. And then just, please let me know your thoughts and how far off or how, right on I am or whatever. And it's understood that this bill can be looked at as an improvement potentially, or not anything to really necessarily be concerned about. And I agree with that. But what I don't like about it is this: there are drug courts, and there are these voluntary paths that people can take if they're caught up in the criminal system, and drugs are a part of it, and against some serious felonies and years and years and years in prison, they can choose voluntarily to go into this other system, where you're just going to agree to do whatever they basically want you to do. And that includes people who are medical marijuana patients not using their medicine anymore. And this bill would allow at least for somebody to demonstrate that their condition is quote unquote serious, and then they could continue to use it. That's what I don't like about it. Somebody's already been through the process to demonstrate by every means that they have a condition that's on the list. A licensed physician has recommended them. They filled out the paperwork properly. It was approved by the state. They were in the registry. It issued a card. I'm sorry, go ahead, Becca.
Can I go in real quick, because
sure. 512 is, just define it.
It's kind of what I just described about there being an ability in the drug court, which is a volunteer system that people take oftentimes to avoid several years of imprisonment and harsh charges. Somebody could possibly demonstrate that if they're a medical marijuana patient, that their condition is quote unquote serious enough to be able to still continue to use the cannabis, even though they're in the drug court. So I think Becca was going to offer a perspective on that.
Yeah. I find this really interesting because, in my work, in my paid work, part of my paid work is making sure that people have the medications that they need, right? Even if they're incarcerated. And so if we're talking pre-incarceration, right? In the court system, a judge would never tell, say, a diabetic patient that they can't take their insulin as part of, their way to right a wrong that they have done to society. And so holding this carrot or denying somebody medication, it doesn't matter. They shouldn't have to show that it is. I don't like the language about showing that it's a severe thing. This is
severe
really
is problematic. Serious.
How is that defined? Number one, what is the definition of serious to them? Is it even defined? Is the first thing. And either way, if this is a medical marijuana patient, that's their medicine. They shouldn't have to discontinue their medicine.
And here are judges
they're involved in court.
Judges and people who aren't medical professionals trying to make these determinations for somebody else as to what is severe, what is serious, or whatever the
I will also say, though, that this is common in drug court across the board with other medications. When we're talking about substances that are traditionally seen as harmful through the drug war, this is very common practice. And so this is really about educating judges and breaking down stigma so that the language is changed when we're seeing these bills come through.
So, Paul, how about quick legal assessment? Of course, I talked to you exactly when he's... Oh, there he is. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to look to see if there's any updated from the Legiscan people. In the definition of this bill, it essentially defines, it gives what it's really after to do, and the intent of where it says, okay, the title is Inconsistencies Between the Medical Marijuana Act and Certain Parts of the Revised Judicature Act of 1961 related to drug treatment courts. Resolve in favor of Revised Judicature Act. So essentially what it says is that, and as a lawyer, like the practical way that this goes about is someone takes advantage of one of the treatment courts, and the treatment courts defined in the language, in like the largest amendment language at the bottom of the page or the bottom of the paragraph is drug treatment court, mental health court, juvenile mental health court, and veterans treatment court. So as Jamie was saying, is that, you know, all of those provide, you know, let's call it jail alternatives or treatment and
diversion. The term is diversion.
That's exactly right. The other treatment programs that would allow them to avoid the full gravity or the weight of the conviction, or the full consequence of the conviction. So essentially what that would mean is that you get assigned to one of these courts because it's best for your client. And the goal is you participate in this. Then the court says, okay, here are the rules, and you agree to play by all these rules. It's the price of admission. And then when you're in there, now you come back to a statute and say, I agree to this statute, but this statute supersedes it, and I'm going to put up a big fight to it. And it gives the deference to say, okay, if the court says so because it's part of the program, and we kind of hate that one size fits all approach, that's really the worst of it. It doesn't say that it allows those courts to create other rules. It just says that if there is a conflict within the existing rules of those treatment courts, then any conflict would be resolved in favor of those treatment courts under that provision.
But typically, the MMMA, being a voter-directed initiative, trumps over all the other laws that are not voter-directed initiatives, Paul. So the reason they feel the need to say this is because attorneys like yourself have successfully used the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act to argue that people have a right to use their medical marijuana even if they're in drug court or other type of probationary situations. So it seems to me that the purpose of the bill is to give drug courts a legal way to say, screw you, MMMA. We want to do what we want to do. And if I don't think your illness is severe enough, then I'm not going to give you your exemption.
Exactly. That's what I would like about it, even though it could be argued that it's an improvement, but it still keeps this mentality that cannabis should be on the list with all these other dangerous substances.
It's keeping the stigmatization of a plant, of a medication, of something we know and have clear research is beneficial, right? It's keeping it stigmatized, and it's keeping it like controlled or as it's seen as dangerous. And so it's continuing this like same type of negative viewpoint instead of eliminating it and saying, look, we made a mistake. We realized we have all this research that shows this is beneficial, and Michigan has legalized this. So, don't worry about that anymore. That's what should really be happening.
And I think like Rick touched on an interesting point too, is that because of the voter initiative, you're going to need 3/4 majority to make this amendment. And do they have enough? I mean, I can see this sort of being a political mid-ground for a lot of issues, is to say, if, drug treatment court and things like that, who's making these recommendations? Is it the courts themselves, or the treatment courts themselves, because it's been such a problem? Is it, just some politician that says this could be a problem? It's the real deference to it is they're trying to make this, let's say, the most recent in time, which is why the MMA worked, is because it had a supremacy clause and it was the most recent. So legal device says that that's always going to win. But again, are they going to have 3/4 majority for something like this? When in reality, this issue could be, such a razor thin issue for most of the public that they might not know how to complain about it.
Paul, is that a direct amendment to the MMMA? I know it says it should list at the very top of the bill exactly which laws it's seeking to amend. I hope this is not an amendment by reference.
No, it seeks to amend Initiated Law 1 of 2008 Medical Marijuana Act, amending Section 7.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that is the 3/4 majority if they're going to actually amend the bill. And for I see some familiar names on here, but
yeah, so there's a lot of names, and it's a bipartisan bill, and it has a lot of momentum. It was going to be heard in committee today. I don't think because of any controversy or anything, but that committee hearing was canceled, so it's coming up, and it'll likely get out of committee. I did speak with the senator about it yesterday, and he doesn't think that it's going to make it through in this session, just for a variety of reasons. So I kind of hope that is the case, but we're concerned about lame duck for all of this stuff. That's when
Jamie,
horse trading goes down. And
it's also possible when they start to build a cluster of bills, they know that we don't like the anti-caregiver bills, but they might throw a drug court bill on there so that when they try and sell it to their fellow representatives and senators, they can say, vote yes for the drug court bill. But then there's also all this other stuff that we absolutely hate along with it. This is how they sweeten the pot. When they know they're trying to pass laws that we absolutely hate, they have to sweeten the pot by throwing us, little tidbits of goodness. And in this instance, it's not even a tidbit of goodness. It's misdirected. Jamie, this is another example of people trying to craft laws about the cannabis industry without anybody who actually knows the cannabis
without
industry.
Stakeholder input.
These aren't players.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this: I had talked to Robin about it, and she doesn't like it either. I mean, there wasn't like even a business, another like known cannabis resource that's hanging around Lansing all the time was even really discussed with. So,
is this a solution to a problem that doesn't exist?
Well, it perpetuates an incorrect perception of cannabis, and that's a problem with it. Even though it might have some
judges' latitude, and that's what those judges really want. They
and Latrice, and like Latrice points out here, I just want to, this kind of stuff always concerns me as far as unintended consequences and for interpretations down the line and all that kind of stuff. I don't know in context what that means, but how broad could that be interpreted by the wrong person at the wrong time?
Yeah, here's the other side of this, which is I think more of a very practical aspect of it, is all of these treatment courts have, let's say, a contract, an admissions contract, right? And they require you to do certain things, whether it's show up once a week or drug test every day or stand on your head and say 3 Hail Marys, whatever it is, that is your requirement to stay in the program. Let's call it like the Catholic school uniform. If you're not dressed in uniform, you're not going to school. So the idea that, let's say you need to give up marijuana or be told that you can't use it, doesn't need to be satisfied through legislative function. It can be satisfied through the paperwork that says, this is one of the conditions of the program. Do you want to participate? Yes or no? And leave it up to the individual. Because then, depending on who the judge is or what the program's deal is, you might be able to get an end around, like in Veterans Court. I don't think there are too many judges in Veterans Court who are going to tell these veterans with PTSD that, hey, you should stop taking what works for you and go on to some pharmaceutical and go back into the hole you came out of. Again, these are issues that don't need to be legislated. These are issues that can be essentially case by case and be dealt with by, let's just say, the admissions standard.
Anton Harb, you're a member of the Hero Project. You're a veteran. Thank you for your service. And you've heard us talk a little bit today about the Veterans Court. Does this particular type of legislation concern you when it seems like people without medical degrees might be deciding the severity of one's medical condition and whether or not they're entitled to cannabis use?
Yeah, I have a big problem with that because here's the thing is I've been out of the military for going on 16 years now. And everywhere I go, everybody wants to tell me what's good for me. They never want to ask me what's actually good and what's working, right? And the problem with a lot of these drug courts are you have judges, and judges by nature tend to be later on in their careers. They're the older generation who have these stigmas and these perceptions with cannabis that are automatically going to kind of trickle down to the veterans as this is bad for you. This is a bad substance. And I believe in their mindset, they're trying to protect you. They want to do the veteran right? But they never take into account what's actually assisting the veteran. And with allowing an independent, a judge who is just merely a perspective at the end of the day, right? Because even though they're interpreting the law, their perspective plays heavily in the decisions that they make. Like, who is the judge even to tell me whether my condition is severe enough, especially with post-traumatic stress, which is, there's no tests, there's no way to look at somebody and tell me whether their PTSD is severe enough. And by an indicator, the fact that the person is, even before a judge says that their condition is severe enough when it comes to post-traumatic stress by their behaviors, the fact they're even in court, right? So, but we will dismiss the one thing that's actually playing a relevant part of their healing process, which for a lot of folks is cannabis, because it's not just the cannabis, it's the control that you have over the medication, the different ways you have to medicate, to experiment, to see what actually helps you, instead of blindly following what some doctor at the VA is. You know, you go to the VA and they tell you it's poison. It's the boogeyman. You shouldn't take it, right? And I mean, my experience with the veteran community, it's very prevalent. And what it's done is both the right and the left are taking notice. And you're now seeing very conservative voices who are in support of this issue because they have friends and brothers and sisters and that are veterans, and they can tell when a veteran's in trouble, the behavior will reflect you know what I mean? So I think that the impact that the cannabis is having on these families is shifting those perspectives. But to allow a judge to come in, or any entity, to tell me what's severe enough to necessitate cannabis use, no, I don't agree with that.
Some particular people don't believe fibromyalgia is a real disease, a real affliction, and they might, if they're a judge that doesn't believe that, they might disallow someone's cannabis use because they simply don't believe what a medical doctor said is true is true.
Well, this is really.
We talked about the lawyers being in trouble. The medical doctors were often threatened with being charged criminally over this process too. Hey, Becca, I tell you what, answer whatever you'd like to say, and then let's really get focus on you guys about a half hour late, and introduce more about the study and the other things that you'd like to just introduce about the subject matter, if you don't mind, and help to introduce Becky for us too.
Yeah, for sure.
Waiting here. So
just to kind of bounce off of what Rick was saying real quick, it is really problematic because, you know, a lot of times people using cannabis is stopping them from doing more harmful drugs, or it's actually helping them not, you know, participate in more harmful drug use. And if you tell somebody with fibromyalgia, which I know several people who were on a ton of different medications for fibromyalgia, then use medical marijuana and cut their medications to a quarter of what they were taking for years and have way higher functionality. So like, it's very damaging, right? Like the stigma is it's very damaging for individuals. We know this, it's harming people. The lack of education of major stakeholders, a lack of understanding from major stakeholders, and, you know, politics and money is getting in the way of actually doing the work that needs to be done and giving people what they need. And that's a problem, and I don't like it. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. I'm Becca, and my friend Becky Reddam is here, and we are working together on a project that is in its second year. And I think a lot of your listeners heard about this a couple of weeks ago when Pam Lynch was on your show here. And so that's who I am. And this is Becky and Jamie. What did you want to kind of talk about?
Well, I mean, for sure, the ongoing study of the cannabis being used as an exit strategy for people to get off of dangerous substance dependency, and then furthermore of what you guys are doing, approaches to research and therapy and the other things that you do.
Sure, absolutely. So you guys all met Pam a couple weeks ago with Harm Reduction Michigan. She is a powerhouse. She's amazing. I love Pam. I love working with her. So we started working on a project together about a little over 2 years ago now. And it has developed into a collective that we're trying to build called Meds for the People. It started out as a project at Wayne State University with myself. And I had heard about this from the previous executive director of the department that I worked for had sent me an article, a research article from a group out of Vancouver, Canada, who was doing groundbreaking harm reduction work, providing cannabis products to individuals who are accessing harm reduction agencies in Vancouver, east side downtown Vancouver area, which is, known for its drug use, right? People, plethora of people who use drugs. And this group showed that cannabis has efficacy for using as a treatment for substance use disorder. They also were able to change policy. So there is actually a change of policy in Canada now where nonprofits and harm reduction agencies can get a kind of like it's like a designation, so they can gift or distribute cannabis products to individuals who access their services. And this is what I kind of modeled this project after, because Michigan is ripe for this. And we're in a for-profit only model, and we're excluding the people that need access to this medicine. And we need to change, we need to fix it now. And what we really need, I think, is a durable nonprofit / caregiver designation. So our project is really about getting people, cannabis products that they can use to either lengthen their use between more harmful substances like opioids, methamphetamine, or reduce their alcohol use, or reduce their anxiety medication, or however they may use it, right? So reducing harm from other things, improving their lives. So that's the first thing, is access. We're doing this through a gifting system. The other thing is we need to be tracking how this is impacting people's lives so that we can show the efficacy of this here in Michigan. And so I'm, trying to collect data about how participants are using these products and things like that. We are also tracking the value of it so that we can show, this is what it is, right? So I'm trying to track and gather all of this information as we're going through this. And then really it's about showing major stakeholders that what's been done in Canada and that it's viable here. We need policy change. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing. And this is all donation based. This is in its second year. It is completely unfunded. This project, in its first year, we collected over $75,000 worth of cannabis products to supply and gift to people accessing services through Harm Reduction Michigan. At the end of last year, the Botanical Company came on board and joined our project. When this project was with Wayne State, I couldn't really advertise it. And so it was kind of like I got the okay from the executive director who has left Wayne State. And so I love this project and I really believe in it. And so when he left, I was like, okay, well then it just needs to be a collective then, because, people need to know what we're doing and we need to get more caregivers donating. We have a couple people. Becky is one of the individuals who makes products and donates to this. And she's an integral part of what we've done from the very beginning. That's kind of what we are doing. We want to give access to people without monetary and social capital and show that this can improve lives, and this should not be only for profit. This needs to be accessible. And this should we want to start with cannabis and obviously, go from there. But our collective is called Meds for the People. That's in a nutshell.
Gathering cannabis in order to gift to people who couldn't otherwise afford it, in order to help them abate the symptoms of substance abuse and have a greater chance of surviving their opportunity to quit or to reduce the severity of those symptoms. That's
while conducting a legitimate study to help point to the substantiation to this whenever this is said. We've seen this. I've experienced it's part of my testimony. We've seen this though in this world for years, and it's gonna be nice to have further a study that can help to back this up, when the time comes. And also, what has been the feedback so far? What has been your experience for how it's worked for the people in this initial?
So we did receive feedback at the end of the first year from participants, and all participants said they would not have any access to cannabis products without them being gifted to them. All participants that gave feedback said that the cannabis products improved their daily functioning. Many of the individuals were using the cannabis products to reduce alcohol cravings, reduce methamphetamine cravings. There were individuals who were utilizing cannabis products to reduce their opioid use, or even stop their opioid use without MOUD. And so there are a wide range of applications for cannabis products in this area. And this is really, this is medicine.
And it's science as well. It's medicine, but you're also doing it in a scientific way, right?
Yeah, so we are right now in the process of seeking IRB approval to do these one-on-one interviews. We've recruited an anthropologist who is very interested in this topic area. I'm also working with a postdoc fellow named Grant, who he specifically researches drug use. That's his area of interest, drugs and drug use. And so we wrote a paper last year, but it got rejected from the journal that we were trying to submit to about this project. And so my goal is that we collect better data this second year, get more donors and more participants on board, so we can really get a good sample size and show the efficacy, so that we can expand this and maybe do it like a bigger study for real, get some larger stakeholders on board. It would be great to get some funding, something like that, because right now this is completely grassroots. This is people that it's on our own time. We just want to do the work. Right. So yeah.
Yeah, and we need a larger variety of products too.
Yes.
Higher dosages.
Becky's a donor? You're a donor, Becky?
I am a donor. I'm a good friend of Becca's. So yes, I make large monthly donations to this project, as well as donating it to my own personal community here in Muskegon. I've been taking care of several individuals very close to me by gifting them high potency extracts and greatly reducing their drug use of methamphetamines and opioids, both. Improving their productivity in our community. And so I just, I really want this to be on a bigger level, and to be able to contribute to this project is absolutely in my heart. I can't wait until more people get on board and this can just blossom. This is going to be a real mover. And I'm, one of those people, one of those voices. It is crucial to our development. And so I'm here for it. I'm here to donate over and over and over again. And I'm just one person. And the amount of donations that I can put out, if we can multiply that by each individual who's willing, who knows, this is not about money. This is about benefiting humanity. And so that's what I'm here for.
Yes. Damn straight.
Yeah.
All right.
And what about the feedback from the group of people that you just help out locally? Are you watching their quality of life improve, lives being saved?
Yes, they are very close to me. I often have people stay with me, stay in my home, so that I can keep a close eye on them, be a support for them in not just plant medicine, but on a more counseling type level for them, to talk it through, and to recognize when they need a certain dose that is higher than of their typical dosage. And so I closely monitor the people that I work with personally, that I gift to personally. And I'm very grateful that we're going to be able to start interviewing the people we are working through harm reduction to get more, detailed feedback, because what we want to do is change these policies, and we need these real stories. We need these real stories to be heard. And so I'm here to, help benefit that and help move that along and be a support for that.
And the original Wayne State study had about 10 participants, but what you're really hoping is to be able to expand the pool of people that you can help in the way that Becky's doing so, beyond that 10 that were originally included. And that would, of course, just be limited by the amount of cannabis donations you're gifted. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We are limited by how much products that we have to give away. And we lost a donor at the end of last year. Becky picked up that for a month, and I got some information so that I could then pick up from there. And I started to produce stuff from the donations that was receiving, that we were receiving, so that there wouldn't be any disruption. But right now we have one dispensary on board, and we have, myself included, 3 donors, and we're supporting, that cohort through Pam. Now, what we need is more donations consistently. We need more people to gift us raw products, finished products, whatever it may be, to expand how many people that we are serving, because we're not going to take on participants if we cannot consistently give them products that they need. And so we are not going to be, telling somebody, yeah, we're going to help you out with cannabis products, and then they only get it for a month and then they don't get it anymore, because no. So it needs to be consistent. And you could even do like a one-time donation. Anything helps. Our hope is that we can get more people interested in donating, and we can get more dispensaries, on board with this. We know that dispensaries need to have a dollar amount attached to it. Right now, that dollar amount is 1 penny. And so people can get what they need. There is enough to go around. Cannabis businesses are thriving. Why aren't we giving back to the community of people that actually could use this, that can't go buy a $15 joint or whatever it is? And a joint isn't going to cut it for these people. These people need concentrate. They need tincture. They need high potency edibles. They need high potency gummies. Okay, this is a population that has high needs. And so if you think medical marijuana patients, that's this population essentially, right? But it's a spectrum.
I think it helps to mention too, as far as donations go, even if individuals aren't able to donate extracts themselves or plant material themselves, we are also in need of grain alcohols and oils to be able to extract in. So any of those type of donations are extremely helpful as well. So
yes, very helpful. So as Becky said, the things that we would use to make the edibles or make the products, we definitely need those as well.
What's the finished product look like when you take it to people? Do they prefer medibles? Do they prefer raw flour? Do you have a mixture? I know that you're talking about taking some raw material and translating it into medibles or other type of extracts. So what's your desired finished product if you could get your hands on anything?
So the biggest things that people are wanting, that we're learning people want, are gummies, high potency edibles like the ones that Becky makes. They are very potent, and tincture. So that's what we're seeing, but that's what we have had to gift too. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where Becky's comment comes in, that we need a bigger variety. So like, also pain rub, we've donated pain rub as well. That was very popular. So it's really about, these people don't have anything to gauge it against, and they don't have access to it. And so really anything that we're gifting them, they're going to use, and they're going to tell us how they're using it, because it's really helping them.
Would that include topical medicines that might help with knees and elbows?
Yes, and we make stuff like that as well.
Yeah, we do.
So yes,
we make
topical is awesome.
Okay, so you're really opening yourself up to a wide variety of products there too, and cannabis flower as well. I mean, people.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Some echo there. So people are interested in getting involved and donating. What parameters surrounding the product are necessary to approach, you with, or where should they contact somebody in order to find out all the information necessary?
Yeah, so we have some documents. I have a donation form. It's an easy Google form, and then we can arrange to meet. I also have an overview of kind of like what our organization is. Jamie, I don't see any way to like, I'll put it here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to drop this in our chat so that you guys can get access to it. So here I have a donor application. So it's not really an application. We'll take your donation. Yeah. It's a form. It's a donor form. And then I have an overview document that kind of goes over like what our purpose is. How is this different? Okay. So yeah. People that are accessing or being gifted these products, they don't have the resources to get a medical card. They don't necessarily, like, doctors aren't going to say, oh, you have opioid use disorder. Let me give you your medical card. You should go to the dispensary and ask for several syringes of concentrate and put that under your tongue and have a safe place to stay for a week. And then come back and see me. Like, doctors aren't doing that, right?
Yeah, that doesn't exist.
This is a response to a question that not everybody could see, and it is. Oh, okay. How is this different from working with the caregiver? It sounds like working with the caregiver. So this is the response to that question.
Yeah. So is it similar to that? I would say yes, but this is under gifting only, and because this is not like a medical indicated treatment at this point, even though like we know it works, right? So that's kind of the difference. That's why, yeah. I was saying we need a durable nonprofit / caregiver thing. Like, this is kind of that nonprofit space where like people don't necessarily have that medical card, but like they really need the help, right? Yeah. So it's kind of not that nonprofit space. We need some kind of designation, and it should be durable for both caregivers and for nonprofits to work in this space. That's our position. So
it's like you're helping people out. When you say participants, these are people just in need. This is not necessarily this completely designed addition to a study or blah blah blah.
No, not at all.
Somebody needs it, you go right to like helping them out. Then. Yeah.
Let me share the participant form with you guys so you can get an idea.
Can we put the address in a scroll at the bottom?
Are these links found on a site anywhere, or are these just?
These are Google Docs. We don't have a site, but we do have a Facebook page. So our Facebook page, you can find all of these forms that I put in the chat, and the Facebook page is Meds for the People.
The chat that you're posting to is a private chat, not the public chat. So
there's no way. It doesn't let me put it in the public one.
There's probably. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Is there any way you guys can transfer it for me?
In fact, I'm going to take all of that right now, and I think I'm going to put it in the Facebook chat that's associated with our broadcast right now. So if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching this on or listening on Pandora or Alexa or Spotify, please visit the Facebook page of Jazz Cabbage Cafe to get those all-important addresses we just talked about.
Yes, and you can also find us on Facebook under Meds for the People. We are a collective. Please join us. We are a collective of businesses, caregivers, activists, anybody who cares about giving people what they need to thrive and access to medicine. Please join us.
Wow, that's amazing, Becca. I have a question for you. So we should talk offline too, because I'm kind of working on a similar idea for veteran access. And I'm wondering, since you've kind of gone down this path now, what barriers have you seen? Has it been the donations? Has it been what have you seen pop up that you didn't expect?
So barriers for us is like community stigma, I'm going to say. And really, because we're working with a harm reduction agency, we approached another harm reduction agency that would love to work with us. But the grant funding that they're receiving from from major stakeholders specifically states they can't even like say, hey, cannabis could help you, and they definitely can't offer this as a tool. And so probably in the same vein, if you're working with the VA, Anton, you're gonna encounter like this stigma or this pushback where it's going to be challenging to get some places on board because they might lose funding. Mm-hmm. The other barrier that we run into is getting people consistently working with us. Getting the word out has been kind of difficult, right? Because it's not.
It's like a dance. You got to dance around it appropriately. You got to find the loopholes and do it correctly. Otherwise, you're going to get shut. Yep. So
yeah, because it's a gray area, right? So it's just like kind of we're kind of all over the place.
I hope this is something too that we can leverage the industry on. You know what I mean? Like you're correct. Grant money and all these outside entities and folks that don't support the cannabis space, but the one group that we can lean on are those who are in it, because I mean the people that are in it have a genuine passion somewhere along the line. And yeah, I think it's rallying the state, rallying the community, rallying our licensees, rallying the message. And I think, I mean, how could you argue with anything you just said, right? And I think that the awareness just isn't out there yet that, we have veterans that they can't afford, like you said, the $15 a pre-roll, or they may not have the connection for quality RSO, or there may be a specific product.
Some people don't even know. Some people don't even know how cannabis can be used to withdraw from opioids without the withdrawal symptoms. Yep. People don't know that. People don't know that, hey, if I take this cannabis tincture, I might not have a craving for methamphetamine for an extra 6 hours. Mm-hmm. And if you're in that place in your life and you get $50, are you going to go get what is going to actually make you feel good right now, or are you going to go to a dispensary? Like, come on.
When we're looking at cannabis too, I think the one thing we can all agree is it treats symptoms. Yes. Like when I was coming off of opiates, right? I didn't need the opiate, but I needed the relief from the nausea, and I needed the relief from, all the nasty shit that comes with it. Right. And that's what cannabis can provide. And if you can provide that symptom relief for long enough to where the person can detox it out of their bodies, I mean, there's got to be a higher success of not going back into, going back to the dope. You know what I mean? There has to be some sort of correlation.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point. And I think you're correct. And I would like to take that idea a step further. I think that people that are being kicked off of their MOUD for using cannabis and failing their drug test for cannabis, they could actually use concentrate cannabis instead of their like buprenorphine, and it would actually be safer and less harmful to their bodies, because we know that buprenorphine is mostly processed in our liver. It's really damaging to it, right? And you have to tirate down off of that if you end up ending your MOUD, right? And then what? And people are getting kicked out of these programs just because they use cannabis, which is probably actually helping them. Cannabis, in most recent research shows, cannabis is a protective factor against overdose of opioids. It protects you from losing that respiratory, losing that respiratory function, right? And so it's a protective factor against opioid overdose. So if you have somebody who's in active use or starting MOUD, the worst things you could do is say, stop using cannabis. Really, truly.
But people don't realize when these doctors were out there, even as soon as 2015 and before the whole opiate crisis broke down and came to light, they are prescribing these substances, but they really do fail to educate people. Like, you're going to feel like you're going to die when you have to come off of this.
Yes, you are.
Or we're going to give you this medication that you ain't coming off of anytime soon, because if you try and come off of it, you're going to feel like you want to die, right? Yeah. They never prefaced that when they were refilling the oxy and the fentanyl and all these different substances. And there was no preparation on the medical community's part when it was time to, hey, we need to get you off of these things because the nasty shit that it's going to do to your body long term that we haven't taken into account, the stomach issues, the mental health issues, the all over just negative effects that these things do to your body. We never accounted for that. We just lived in the moment to try and treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And trauma is the underlying issue across the board. Trauma. Absolutely. And the lack of connection. We know that connection is the opposite of addiction. We also know that cannabis is less destructive than alcohol. It's less destructive than tobacco. There was a recent study that just came out that showed that the actual gateway drug is nicotine, and it primes your brain to have a stronger
addictive tendencies.
Addictive tendency to amphetamines. So cannabis could easily balance underlying issues, and we know that it does.
Well, not let's talk about this. Let's say, when we're talking about disabled veterans or veterans who are suffering from PTSD and TBI, right? There's one thing that cannabis helps, that is like suicide. Let's talk about that issue, that this can play a role in actually saving a person's life, right? So I don't really care what the negative effects, to be honest. If it came out 20 years down the road that there was some sort of whatever negative effects, you know what, the person is alive. So I think that we negate, or we refuse to talk about that type of thing, right? Until it actually touches their families personally. Then when they've had a veteran who is able to come out of their funk because of edibles, something as simple as a gummy bear, right, is now taking that veteran to a place to where they can function as somewhat of a human being, right? I've been to places in my life where I was like a zombie. I wasn't even human, right? So, and cannabis helped relieve that and bring back a sense of self that I don't think medicine, pharmaceuticals can't do that.
I'm right with you there too, Anton. Even though I'm not a veteran and I don't have those anxieties for that reason, I have had severe mental health diagnoses myself and was on cocktails of pharmaceuticals that threw me into suicidal loops, being inpatient for suicide attempts 3 times. And finally, against all of my doctor's recommendations, you need to wean off these meds and so on and so forth. And I'm not telling others to not follow those protocols. However, cannabis absolutely swooped in and saved my life from suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, those addictive symptoms that make you just feel like you're going to die, even if you didn't want to commit suicide, because they're just so severe. So I'm a survivor from that also, and is another reason why I'm here. So,
and you're talking about the intent. The actual and legislative intent behind the Medical Marijuana Act was to treat the symptoms and conditions of these things. And it is exactly as you said, that was everything you're talking about was exactly the reason and why this is here. And it's a reminder that just because we have achieved recreational status, that we are a legal state now, doesn't mean that any of these issues have gone away or have been addressed appropriately. The other thing that I hear Becca and Becky really getting at to me is, and I know we can lean on Rick to blow the trumpet on this, but this really sounds like a call to action for the caregiver community. To me, this sounds like, hey, there are growers out there sitting on something. There are people out there who have, RSO that they can't get rid of, that they have these products that they can't seem to get rid of. And
I've even heard of a lot of caregivers out there that will burn a lot of their access. They will just burn it.
Give it
Don't
to
do
us.
it, please. Right.
It's like bakeries throwing
burning
away bread.
their sugar cream and everything else that can be
Give
used.
it to us.
Yep.
So we can amplify it.
Where would they take this stuff so they could give it to us?
We're both in Muskegon.
Mm-hmm.
So, reach out. You can message Meds for the People on Facebook. We also have an email, meds.for.the.people@gmail.com. So you can email us there. So either way, we will make it happen. We'll set up a meeting. We'll come and get it, whatever.
Yep. I will drive out to wherever,
we'll go wherever you are.
Yeah.
Well,
And I'll tell you what might be a good endeavor for us on this side of the state, Rick, is that maybe we could create like a collection location and reach out to all the caregivers and have the caregivers, dump it all into one location for us and then coordinate a pickup for the Muskegon trip.
Yeah.
Well, Attorney Tylenda, what's the legality of having, a big, little bucket of pot sitting right there, sir?
Well, who's getting caught? How many offenses do they have? Right? How far over their legal limit are they for the first time?
No.
Maybe we could offer up a civil infraction payment in the event of.
I can't tell you. Yeah, I can't tell you that there are probably some locations. For example, we have a couple centers here in Flint that are farmers market style things that we could probably arrange for people to visit at a particular day and drop off stuff to you. I think it would be well worth your time to come out to Genesee County. It's also true that with those caregiver operations like that, those people have some of the biggest hearts of anyone you've ever met in your life. So if we get a chance to put you up on stage and talk to folks and explain what you do, and the importance of it, I think you might find yourself oversupplied, actually.
That would be wonderful. And, I had a couple people I saw in the comments on the Facebook and YouTube chat. I don't have access to respond on that, but I had a couple people that asked, is this separate from Pam? No. If you have product that you want to gift directly to Pam that's finished product that those participants we currently have, can use, by all means do so. We are trying to expand it as well, as Pam said, and we're trying to expand it, and Becky and myself make stuff from raw products to be able to do that. And we would also like to start a cohort in Muskegon, if possible, as we are growing this, and add to the people that Pam is serving, through Harm Reduction Michigan. So is it independent? No, we are a collective. We are all working together on this common goal. So just
the more the merrier, the more the merrier.
Well, you have seen in the chat probably comments from Connie Sparrow, and they happen to be very, very local to you. It would behoove you to connect with the Sparrow. They have access to a lot of regulated marketplace actors, as well as a lot of cities that have a desire to have cannabis more involved in the way that they treat substance abuse. It is still one of those things we haven't done yet, as far as having substance abuse disorder added to the list of conditions for which one can have a medical marijuana card assigned.
It needs to be changed. Number one, yes, you're right, that needs to be changed. But I think the other piece of that, the part, I don't know if it's the reason behind it or whatever, but SUD is seen this is a money machine for the prison industrial complex, right? So people who are part of that system that could benefit from it, of course they're not, that's why people who are justice involved, shy away from using cannabis for this type of stuff, because then you're a technical violator, then you go back to prison. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't really benefit the prison industrial complex to say, to acknowledge that all this research shows it's great for treating substance use disorder, right? And then it gets put on this medical marijuana thing. Well, that's a whole lot of money that's coming out of that prison pipeline. I'm a macro social worker, so I'm just saying, you got to remember that.
Remember too that in Michigan, because of the Michigan, Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act of 2018, we allowed gifting as a legal activity. So you can legitimately gift cannabis to someone for a program like this.
Mm-hmm.
When it was just the medical marijuana law, there was an interpretation by the courts that even casual gifting or sharing of a single joint actually constituted a crime. So we fixed it, and now it's legal, and you don't have to worry about the consequence for this. It seems like there really wouldn't be. Paul, we have Gummo, by the way. Gummo in the comments mentions he's listening to and watching our show from an ice shanty while fishing, and Super Attorney Paul Tylenda looks like he's in an ice shanty actually right now. He's got all parked up and everything. But Paul, I mean, isn't that true? Gifting is allowed, and when people talk about participating in something like this, they're not trying to solicit something that would get anybody in trouble, right?
Correct. And that's the whole part, is that you're talking about the delivery without the remuneration. And that's what, if you're going to, let's say, give pot to somebody and expect money in return, then you have to have a license. But the law does allow for the sharing, gifting at that point. And it becomes kind of a private transaction that, who's really going to look at it, unless, of course, you're doing this, I don't know, across the counter in front of a police station.
Right.
But, the old standard of gifting, and that's the thing I've been banging around in my head here, is that, how can we get the big players, the big box stores, who are probably growing, probably have excess of marijuana that they're, if it doesn't meet their standard, they turn it into extract. But if we can find a way they can gain, let's say, a benefit to donating some of that product, and maybe there's a tax benefit because it's an inventory, that would be, provide them some incentive, right? Because it's, doing the right thing is not always the reason people do stuff, right? Doing the right thing because it provides a benefit is typically the incentive, is to say, hey, this is good for you and it makes you look good. Businesses like that, and finding
so you take
that
a
way.
selfie, you do some marketing for it, but you're happy to have the donation because it will help people, right?
Yeah,
well, and especially the big footprint, you can donate a small amount of marijuana for a big grower, and that's a huge amount of marijuana for the organization.
Yep.
And I'm working on an idea like that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think kind of bouncing off of what you were saying, Paul, that's really
old schooler.
I really like that, because that's kind of what we're getting at, is like, this is a way for companies to give back to the community, and you have this social equity language in place. Most municipalities do. And so why isn't this gifting to people that, can't afford your product, a part of that? It should be, right?
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, with the way that, if you put, veteran and, let's say, mental health treatment and things like that in the first few words, it legitimizes everything thereafter, because people care about those two things a whole lot, and those are very important things to people. And even if it was treat mental health and treat veterans and care for veterans by eating Twinkies, people are like, I guess we're eating Twinkies now. And to get onto that support system of that support side of it is really where, using language to your advantage can capitalize, because now you can pull at the heartstrings and pull at the actual business strings of these players and say, this is what we're doing and here's why. And you give them you're giving them the reason why they can't say no.
Yeah, Paul, and I'm having this conversation. I'm finding, as of recently, with a lot of different licensees, exactly what you said. And the benefits to with the veteran community about getting on board with a program of where I would like to envision a veteran in need, or even somebody with mental illness, to be able to walk into a dispensary and obtain whatever their allotted amount would be through that program. But you know what that does? People want to support the businesses that help the veterans. If you're going to step up and you're going to give any population of folks something, when as a community that they need these types of whether it be a gummy or a pre or whatever the product is, we want to support you, and you're going to have that veteran support from the community that does have the means and the resources to walk into a dispo and drop $500. And I think that you're just going to see the melding of the community, realizing that these issues need to be addressed. Now we have an established kind of supply chain. We see how it works. We kind of have rules in place. Now we can really help people. I think before we were kind of just letting the chips fall where they may and trying to figure out as a system how this would work. But I think you're 100% right. A small portion, a small donation of product could impact how many Michiganders? Crazy.
In the chat, we've already seen people from Ann Arbor offering to help out. That's fantastic. There's someone posted their phone number specifically in the chat, so make sure you get that. And that's a pretty valuable thing. We love how people respond to really good causes. right? Doesn't matter, regulated market, unregulated market. When you hear a story that touches your heart, you reach out. So that's a proof statement for the humanity of us. It was mentioned that sometimes people do good things for the wrong reason. That's true. Sometimes we see big corporations that seem to adopt former felons like carbon credits, trying to make some kind of payola in order to make up for all the crap that they've done previously over the last year and all the horrible legislation they've sponsored. It is possible for us just to appreciate the good things. And frankly, when you're talking about frontline workers helping people break their addiction, I think you should take it and be grateful. And all of the adult use recreational businesses here in the state of Michigan have to have a social equity plan as part of their business plan. So they have to satisfy it in some way. I mean, there are many, many causes out there that are deserving, but certainly this has to be one of them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously with Franklin Field has worked in with you already, the botanical company Franklin Field, then clearly other licensees can do so without fear of any consequence, because clearly the botanical company's done it and there hasn't been any issue. So
yeah, we're going to talk to some places. I'm going to help out with some discussion with some places in the Muskegon area here this month, and so get to meet Becca and Becky in real life. Hopefully been on a couple of these.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
Jen,
grateful.
I saw your comment. Yeah, most of the products that we're getting at this point are all the trim and all the finished products that we have gotten up until this point, except for the ones from the botanical company, have been from caregivers. Yeah. So just FYI. Go ahead, Becky. Sorry, there was a comment.
Oh, I wasn't saying much except expressing gratitude. Much gratitude.
well, and I know that when you were working with Wayne State, you described how it was difficult for you to seek notoriety for this program, that there were certain, restrictions on what you were doing. Clearly, there's no restrictions on talking about it now, and I'm really glad we have an opportunity to give you a vehicle to reach out. Jamie set this whole thing up. Jamie Lowell, kind of, the man wearing the weird looking hat. He's the guy that makes things happen for people, and I'm really happy that we've had this. This is the second in a series of interviews that we've done on this particular subject, and Jamie plans for another one coming up soon too.
Yeah, the story about how all this came together is pretty cool in and of itself. So
Yes,
we'll talk about that, and hopefully we'll have the former executive director of this study who was at Wayne State and moved from there to another job. He got out of the academic side of stuff and continued research somewhere else. So with that, this study went. But then, as Becca said, people are staying together, working on it independently, and again with no funding or just because they know how important this is. And we'll also be able to get the IRB sanctioning the legitimacy for the research and the data to be applied to something that's meaningful and as I said before, substantiating what we all know. And that's why you guys go right for helping people out. I mean, you don't need this study to be seen through and officially concluded and reviewed by peers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that this is a legitimate way to get people off dangerous.
We know it has efficacy. We know that it has efficacy.
And as soon as that report comes out, everybody who told you no along the way will now tell you what a great idea it is and how smart you are. And, oh, wow.
it was their idea to begin with. Yeah.
It's been happening. So.
Pam Lynch, by the way, Pam
Already
Lynch
in works.
comments. These two Beccas have been angels, so thank you very much. You certainly have done a great job.
As Pam's been watching, she's
Pam's
Thank
awesome.
you, Pam.
yeah.
We love you, Pam.
Pam will be back on for sure, but hopefully we'll have Brad Ray on the.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool how when he went to Wayne State, it was included in his agreement that he'd be able to do research like that, and so he used that as a vehicle to get this started. That's a really cool part of the story. His wife happens to also work with us at Carbidex, Franklin Field and Botanical Company, etc. And she made the original connection. We had some good conversations and kept it going from there. And then other people like Cass, obviously has interest in stuff like this too. And
Cass Coleman from Carbidex,
Yep,
wonderful person that's been on our show many times.
Kept the momentum going, and we're all in this. It's just a great idea. I mean, if somebody knew that, like, somebody had a little extra, but it was like going to be a donation, like we were talking about, you know, the risks for having certain amounts that we're allowed to transfer between each other. I mean, it's for this cause, you know. I mean, I would hope that even the police might and the prosecutors might not want to make such a huge deal about something like that. But
you know, and I haven't been sure of the laws all along. You know, I'm just kind of sticking my neck out there.
Well, so just
you know.
Paul, let me know if this is right. You know, an adult can gift 21 or over could gift another adult 21 or over 2.5 ounces. Possessing up to 5 ounces is a misdemeanor of $100 or up to $500 or something like that.
Civil infraction. And
oh no, I'm sorry. I said civil. I'm sorry. I meant to say civil infraction.
I was wondering.
Indication of a sale.
I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. I meant to say civil infraction.
It's civil infraction, so it's a $100 first offense, $200 second time offense, and then the whole, like, you know, factually driven. If it's indication that there's a sale or money, then it can be a non-jailable misdemeanor. But you're not going to have any indications of a sale or money or anything like that. And in reality, the scope on things, like, you'd have to, you know, let's just say, practically speaking, you'd have to draw like just the worst cop, right, and then the worst prosecutor, and then the worst judge to really have an issue over it. Yeah. But, you know, that's not saying it's not possible. It would
I'm just going to say weird stuff happens in my life. So I have tended to be careful now because all the, that's a 1 in a million things always seem to happen to me.
Right.
So.
Buy a lottery ticket.
Always better safe.
Let's hope that changes for the better ones, though, not the negative.
So I'll point this out quickly. The up to 5 ounces being a civil infraction.
Twice the amount. Now here's the hitch is that if I go to your house, can't.
You delivered that very well, Paul. That was funny. Excellent.
If I go to your house, does that make it 10 ounces? Because now you have 10 in the household or 10 at the house. This is also one of those, like, you know, I'm kind of getting it towards like the idea of, you know how like there's this old philosophy that you can do 5 over on the freeway and it's not really speeding. Like,
good way to look at it.
More or less true, right? Unless you get Officer Dickhead, right? So there's a lot of things that, you know, marijuana isn't worth the chase, right? Because there's no juice at the end of the squeeze of any marijuana case, right? There's no gold at the end of the marijuana rainbow for the police, right? Their mind is like, look, if you're not driving a van made of weed like Cheech and Chong, you probably are within your limit, and it's probably not me worth wasting my time and all that kind of, you know, practical shit, right? But I always look at it in the same way that there are a lot of offenses that clients of mine have gotten over the time where it's just like, you know what? They didn't write you the ticket for this. They wrote you the ticket because you were a fucking asshole the whole time. And they had no choice but to write you for something. Right? So there are a lot of times where it's just like, look, if you're not, you know, doing 90 with a handgun down a side street, you know, the chance of you getting pulled over and them really making a big stink about it really is going to depend on a whole lot of other factors.
I'm just looking at this here. I'm not sure if Gummo's got this correct. I'm not familiar with being able to apply this to our laws here in Michigan. That somebody could have 200 plants. I don't believe that that's true at all.
No,
after 24 plants,
that doesn't seem correct.
After 24 plants, you're outside of the civil infraction zone, and so I don't know where that number comes from. What else you described could apply as far as supposed to kind of getting slaps on the wrists, you know, consecutively, as long as there's no sales and all that kind of stuff going.
Yeah, $100, $200 second offense, and an indication of sale, non-jailable misdemeanor, and that was always the. I've dealt with that in court as a solution, and no one seems to know what the hell a non-jailable misdemeanor is, or how it works, or what you do for it, or how, you know, because really a non-jailable misdemeanor is it's akin to a traffic.
Isn't that like a fine run?
Yeah, it really is.
It's a fine only.
It's just like, give us your money.
Yes, right. But what it is it's like it's a fine with a
See,
it's a
and that's if
fine
somebody's in the
intent,
position
too.
to determine that you're in that you have that kind of account. The chances of somebody being able to come down into your basement or what your whatever should be really slim under these circumstances. Not to say that it doesn't happen, because we know about some cases that
Right, and I tell you
people
what,
allow
like
people in,
I'd love to fight that case, because as soon as they make a stink about it, now they're going into this huge, let's say, factual presentation of how you are violating the law, and here are the facts that indicate this sale and all this shit, and you're taking up, a day's worth of a cop's time on an offense that's a non-jailable misdemeanor. Most of their bosses won't let them show up for that bullshit.
So
They're gonna
Gummy
say,
says he's correct. That's why Gummo says he's correct.
Sure,
Sorry,
sure.
Gummy. Gummo says he's correct. So people should look
Gummy's
into
sweet.
that. That doesn't apply to anything that I know of that's in the law.
Paul's a criminal defense attorney. That's why we have attorneys on the show, so that we can sometimes bust some of these misconceptions.
Do everybody take a look at it again?
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's part of the problem with the laws, is that there's so much misunderstanding about what we have and what we don't have. It's one of the reasons why sometimes people hesitate to donate things, because they're not exactly sure what the legal status is. But seriously, if you want to participate in a program like what Becca and Becky have described today, I mean, you really should just look into your soul and be able to participate, and know that as long as you're doing it within the parameters we described today, that you're going to be legal. And let's remember too, that if you have the inkling to do this and you're the least bit concerned, call an attorney and have a consultation. As long as hopefully you'll pick an attorney that's familiar with cannabis laws, but talk to somebody and make sure that you're straight within in your head, so that your head and your heart are both in alignment when you make that donation. So you do it without any issue with conscience, or without any question about whether it was the right thing to do. So I'd suggest that. Consultations with attorneys are some of the most disquieting things ever, but also sometimes they can be reassuring too.
Pam's putting out some more testimonials of how cannabis has been used to reduce harm and help people out situations. So
it's the exit drug.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
An exit drug. We have
Maybe
research that shows it. We have research that shows it. And I mean, I have. There was a rather lengthy article put out by a group of nurses. I want to say like 2010 or something, and it was all around using cannabis as harm reduction. Like they were proponents of it. Yeah, it's wild. The stuff that you can find is wild. It truly is an exit drug.
Becca, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our 2 hour show. We have just 2 or 3 more moments left.
Okay.
I'd love to, if Becca and Becky, if you could just one more time, just tell people how they can reach out to you and maybe assist the program that you've described today.
And any final thoughts you might want to add too?
Yes.
Sure. So you guys can reach out to us at Meds for the People on Facebook, or you can message us there, or we have an email, meds.for.people@gmail.com. We are a collective of activists, caregivers, individuals, businesses, and stakeholders, researchers that want to provide access to everybody who can benefit from cannabis, and specifically right now to increase access for people already accessing harm reduction services in the state of Michigan, and promoting policy change to include nonprofits in gifting cannabis. And we are seeking donations.
Donations of flower product, as well as elements that we could use to extract, including grain alcohols, oils, glycerins, etc. All of those things are extremely beneficial donations. Much gratitude.
Right on. Thank you guys very much. This was another great conversation. I knew it was going to be pretty cool, especially after how it went with Pam. And this is something that a lot of people can relate to, whether they experience for themselves. Becky, I kind of thought that you learned to make these products and all that kind of stuff based on probably trying to help yourself out at some point, but you said it later on in the show, and that's a common story. You're using that experience and benefit to help out others, and that's much appreciated too. And Becca, thanks a lot for your research, and on top of doing our, all the rest of this, being in a position to help that and deciding to continue to do it as part of this independent group, given the circumstances that came.
Well, that's really born from my personal experience as well. So I am a passion-driven person and very ethically driven as well, and that's where this is coming from.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank
both
you.
of you guys.
Thank you very much.
And we'll as we'll have Pam on, we will have you guys back on. This is something that we can continue to check on and make people aware of, and also
especially when you have good news to share. We love it when you come on for good news.
A lot more good conversations here to be had, and important ones too. So, Paul, anything you want to leave us with?
You know, I go back to this, and I think this conversation today was really points to the fact that the people and the needs of the medical marijuana program are still here, and they're still going without. And there's a lot of people that don't have what I think a lot of us at this level now take for granted, right? I don't care how many billboards on I-75 you see. I don't care how sweet your buddy's Croptober was, because the needs haven't changed. The realities for a lot of people here haven't changed, and now it's becoming more accepted, more mainstream. Those needs will increase as those who learn about it become more numerous. So I think that's one thing worth kind of remembering is, let's, not forget how we got here. Let's not forget the needs of those that brought us to where we all are and brought us to where we all wanted to be. And look into that and find out what we can each do at some level to bring that back and to remain connected to that, because those connections, now that some of us are living high on the hog and we're living in a free land, we got to take those along with us. We've got to pull people along with us and do work to help those that don't have as easy of a road as we do.
Right on. Thanks a lot. Anton, want to?
Hey, I'm excited about the work y'all are doing. I appreciate the fact that sticking up and believing in something and actually translating that to actionable change in people's lives. I commend you for that. And I hope the donations roll in, and I hope you can go and service as many folks as you can possibly do. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll do it again, as I said. Rick, you want to wrap us up?
Paul hit on it. Really, there's a lot of work left to do. And there's certain instances when the government is not the right agent with which to accomplish work, right? There's bureaucracy, there's hesitation when you need to have speed and decisiveness. So we're looking at people who've taken the world by the horns and decided to take on a project and kick its ass, actually. So at this particular point, what we're really seeing here is the realization of what we'd hoped to happen. Government provides some work, we provide some work, and we coexist. I think people that try and create a narrative in Michigan where it can only be the regulated market and it cannot ever be the unregulated market, that the unregulated market has to get completely squashed in favor of the other, I think there's no way that'll ever happen. But if it did, you'd lose all of this. And why would anybody want that? Why would anybody that knows want that? So just another proof positive of why we have to protect and preserve the system that we currently have here in the state of Michigan.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Rick. All right, everybody. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Great show. Much appreciated. We'll be back next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to all our guests.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.